Hi, Adib. Thank you for joining me today. I kind of always wanted to have this session with you because everybody knows how famous this book is. There is no hidden secret. So this was on my TBR for a very long time, and I finally got around to reading it, loved it. So I'm so honored to be in conversation with you today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's the pleasure is mine.
Yes. So, as I said, this book, and you don't really need an introduction. I think that's already done. So instead of you telling us, the usual introduction or, telling us what the book is about, could you tell us something which, as of now, you haven't shared? Like maybe something which is new
Oh, something new. Oh, that's a challenge. Um,
about you or about either of the two books,
oh, um,
just to make it easy for you.
yes. Okay. Am I allowed to like give spoilers?
Yeah, I think you can. I'm trying not to give spoilers for the second book because it's only a
Okay.
year since it has come out. So yeah, I've
Okay.
framed the questions
Fair.
accordingly.
Yeah, I will say, okay, well, once, uh, oh my gosh. Now I'm spiraling. I'm like, what are things that no one knows? And then what are things that are interesting? Um, I will say, um, in the very original version of Darius the Great is Not Okay, it was
Yeah.
actually missing several characters. Both Trent and Chip weren't in like the first two or three drafts of the book, which is very funny given what an important role they end up playing
Playing, yeah.
later.
Yeah.
But they were late additions to the story.
Hmm.
I don't know if this is a secret so much. I feel like not everyone always knows this, but like um, people are like, were you planning to write a second one? And no, I wasn't planning to write a second one, but
Yeah.
definitely like I had an idea of um, where Darius was going in his
Right.
life, just in general, whether I got to write another book,
Right.
and yes, I already knew some
Hmm.
stuff about like Chip and Chip's relationship to Darius by the end of the first one.
Yes.
Thank you.
So,
That's a really good question and very unexpected. So
yeah. So now I wanted to quickly jump and talk about, as I said, the book has won several awards. It's all listed down here. It's been 4 years since the first one came out, 1 year since the second one came out. A few weeks ago, it was, said it came on Times as the 100 best YA books that you need to read. So, what's different? How has life been for you since this came out and right now? Or how is it
uh,
similar?
yeah, it it changed a lot. Kind of becoming an author. I would actually say having a book come out changed my life a lot less than the pandemic has.
Yeah.
Because even after the book came out and did well, and I was really lucky, I was still keeping a day job as well.
Mhm.
Um, because here in the United States, we mostly get like health insurance through our day jobs,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And I
Yeah.
really wanted to have health insurance.
Yeah.
There was also a lot of stability.
Yeah.
And my day job, I was working for a company that did like live events, concerts, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so it let me be out with people and
Mhm.
doing things that were
Right.
like, immediately obvious when we'd achieved something. You
Right.
like go and do a concert and you get to see the concert and you know that you've achieved it.
Mhm.
And books are so different. You can work and work and work for months and then still not see the book out on shelves for like 2 years.
Yeah.
Um, and so even after Darius came out, I was still working that job as well. And it was basically when the pandemic hit that job went away,
Mhm.
and suddenly I had to write full time. And I think that changed my life more than anything because I've had to kind of rebalance my whole life and like how I spend my time and how I make sure I'm like experiencing humanity because it's really easy to just stay in my office
Yeah. Yeah.
all day, every day and not do anything.
Right.
Um, and just, I guess, on a personal level, something that the book really did change for me was,
Mhm.
growing up, I was a lot like Darius. I felt very alone at times in my kind of experience of identity.
Right.
And now I hear from lots of people who the book has resonated with and that have had similar experiences. And that makes me feel a lot less alone. And that's been really a really nice and unexpected
Absolutely.
result.
Absolutely beautiful. So, as you said, that the book has found its way into the readers and has different meanings for different people. So there are so many things that, I can touch upon. There are so many different themes and things that you've touched upon in your book. But what personally resonated with me and what I felt this book is essentially about is the father and the son relationship. Because that's flawed. They don't always see eye to eye, but it's still so beautiful. And I mean, I love the way kind of, you bring it to a closure in here. And then again, what happens in book two. So it's all very interesting. And considering the fact that today so many, we have like several TED talks where, people have come up and said importance of parenthood, importance of fatherhood, and what necessarily a role of a father is specifically in the life of a teenage boy. I mean, it's not saying that for girls or for intersex or for trans people, they are not important. But of course, boys will have certain different kinds of experiences with their father. So in that respect, what can you tell us about how, the whole equation that you have, kind of developed in this book, what was it laid on?
Oh, I think a lot of it was laid on my growing up, kind of living under the burden of toxic masculinity, and therefore wanting to do my part to dismantle it. Right. And, as you mentioned, fathers are important to everyone. Yeah. Parents in general are important to everyone.
Of course.
But there's a particular responsibility that cisgender men have in raising cisgender boys, to break the cycle of patriarchy and violence and white supremacy that, right. And this is I think particularly American concern, but because of, colonialism, it's kind of a global concern as well.
It is.
But at the end of the day, cisgender men are the ones who have to fix cisgender boys, right, because of the power they have in almost every culture in the world, whether they're Western or not. Yeah. Cisgender men have a lot of power, and so it's up to us to make the world better, right? And not to make the world better for other cisgender men, but to make the world better for everyone, and that means giving up things, right. Giving up power. And so I really wanted to examine, the role that a father can have in this, especially a father that's trying to do right and still sometimes failing, because Darius's dad definitely fails at times, definitely comes up short, sometimes just doesn't know what to do and is just doing whatever seems like a good idea at the time. Right. And I think for me, the most important thing about Stephen is that when he realizes that he's making mistakes, he apologizes and tries to correct them, which I think is something that, not parents aren't always comfortable apologizing to their children. Certainly in Iranian culture, it can be, it's definitely more of like a younger generation thing for parents. So a lot of it came from the fact that as I was writing, I did some calculation to see how old the characters were. And I realized, I'm kind of getting older, and I was actually closer in age to the parents than I was to Darius. Yeah. And that really made me think a lot about how I would parent if I had any kids. Right. And, what I would want for my kids. So right. It was very sobering. I had to lay down for a while as I was pondering mortality, but I think it all worked out in the end.
That I wanted to touch base on was the fact that how tea, which is played chai, which has played a very interesting role in the book. And I see that you have listed out several different kinds of teas that are available, including the first flush Darjeeling, which is exclusively made and grown in India. So I wanted to know how much of chai or tea do you drink or do you make, or just what's the equation? Because Darius made a lot of tea.
Yeah, I probably have 3 to 5 cups a day. I always start with something kind of a strong black tea in the morning to wake up. I don't really drink coffee ever. Okay. And then around kind of late morning or lunchtime, I'll usually have kind of a lighter black tea. Sometimes in the summer, I'll have iced tea. Yep. And then in the afternoon, I usually have oolong or green tea. And then in bed, I usually have green tea or sometimes an herbal. growing up, tea is a really important part of Iranian culture and Iranian hospitality.
Right.
Visiting my family, the kettle was always on. Because Iran shares a border with Russia, they had kind of imported the samovar from Russia. And so you'd always have, a big pot of boiling water and then really strong tea, and you could just dilute it how you wanted. And so I just grew up with tea as tea was a signal of welcome and family. And I think that's true for a lot of Iranians. And I personally just kind of fell in love with the world of tea as I got older. Kind of got fascinated with, how it's made, where it's grown affects the way it tastes, the different kind of ways of preparing it and honoring it, the history of it, which is really beautiful in some ways, but really messy in other ways, because again, colonialism and imperialism. But it's, one of the oldest cultivated plants on the planet, and it's delicious. And so since Darius was Iranian and I knew tea was going to be a big part of his hospitality and culture, I was like, well, I know all this stuff about tea. Maybe I'll make Darius be a tea nerd too. Because again, there was no one to stop me from doing what I wanted.
Right.
And that ended up being really fun. I think sometimes we as adults forget how smart teenagers are. And when they care about something, they learn everything they can about it. They are knowledgeable and passionate. And it was really fun for me to honor that in Darius, that yes, he was only 15, but he had a tea encyclopedia in his brain.
Right.
Because I knew people like that in high school. I know people like that now, even teenagers that are like that. And so I really wanted to honor that.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I haven't come across a lot of books that have, tea. I think the general norm is always to say coffee. I mean, for some reason, even though a lot of people don't really prefer coffee over tea, I don't know why this has become a set prototype for the world or for the literature, but I'm glad that, there's a book which has so much of tea in it. So that's amazing. So, kind of moving on and going to the diversity part that is in the book, and talking a little about, I think I'm not getting it right, the pronunciation, Zoroastrianism, the religion. Yes. So, Zoroastrianism as a religion hasn't, at least to me, I haven't come across a lot of YA literature that has representation for this particular religion. You see Muslim reps, Islam reps, you see all kinds of other reps, but I haven't really read anything like this. So Darius the Great is officially my first book. So in that sense, when you were writing this book, did you feel certain kind of, a responsibility or kind of a challenge, because you were kind of, not to say the first, but you were the one who became a prominent, known person whose book has this representation?
It's something I thought about a lot. My family history is actually, my family is Baha'i, like Sohrab's family. But there was a lot of complications around Baha'is traveling back to Iran if they've left.
Right.
And I myself am not Baha'i anymore. I'm basically an atheist. And so I knew I really was interested in kind of exploring the experience of religious minorities in Iran. And a little further back in my family heritage, we have a lot of Zoroastrian ancestors. The city of Yazd was a very prominent site for Zoroastrians.
Right.
And so I felt like I had the interest, and I had the kind of family knowledge and resources to hopefully, do it as right as I could. And at the same time, I was very cognizant that I am not Zoroastrian. And that's one of the primary reasons that Darius himself is also not. He's just from that family.
Yes.
Family heritage. And I think kind of regardless of your religious upbringing, if you're not brought up in that religion, the feeling of disconnect with your family is very similar across kind of all religions, that
Right.
kind of being both inside and outside.
Right.
And but yeah, I was very aware of kind of the space I was taking up, and hopefully making space for others in the way that I did it, rather than closing the door. Hopefully I opened more doors. And I think at the end of the day, like, that's all any of us can do is, do our best to send the elevator back down as it is.
Right. Interesting. Very nicely put together. So I also wanted to kind of, touch a little bit on the fact that and I think it's mentioned in the book as well, that it's so difficult for, for them to actually go to Iran, because it's so difficult for an American, even if you're like from an Irani background, it's still a little difficult. And I think I saw a couple of your interviews on YouTube where I think you've mentioned that you personally have never been to Iran. So I kind of wanted to know that, while you were kind of writing this book. So, and from what I have read, from what I have understood, from what media has portrayed, I believe that there is an unfortunate stereotype when it comes to Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, and all the Middle Eastern countries in the US because of what happened in the 9/11 and so on and so forth. So while writing this, and while writing, because this book would have majorly been a US release, I'm assuming it had a US release initially until it went across the world. So were you apprehensive of how this would be received?
I don't know that I ever had much apprehension on that front. I think I always figured no one would read it except other Iranians, and they would enjoy being seen in the pages of the book. Growing up, I can't think of a single book I read growing up that had Iranian people in it. And as I got older, like, there were plenty of books about terrorism that had Iranians, which I think erases a lot of differences amongst Middle Eastern peoples, because Iran's relationship with the United States, while antagonistic, has not really been a terroristic one. It's been a lot of, aside from the hostage crisis, it's been a lot more almost like a Cold War. Iranians have never like launched any attacks on U.S. soil. But yeah, so I knew that, the average American that was not Iranian heritage had, probably a stereotyped and unnuanced view of Iran.
Right.
And so I do think it was a little bit of a juggling act of like, when do I need to explain something versus when do I just need to assume that either A, people in the culture will get it, or B, people outside the culture will go look it up if they want to get it. And it ended up being that because Darius is half Iranian and because I'm half Iranian, I have a white mother, Darius has a white father. Right. We both have had to navigate at times kind of interrogating what we know about our own culture. And so I really kind of let that guide me in a way, that there are some things that Darius just knew intrinsically. And so those were the things he didn't bother to explain. And there were some things that he was grappling with or confused about or still learning. And those were the times when I kind of, slowed down and explained Iran, both to Darius, explaining to himself and to the reader.
Right.
And, when I was writing the book, I first started writing it in 2015. The nuclear deal between the United States and Iran had been solidified, and it looked like we were heading toward maybe slightly better relations. And, by the time the book came out, the orange one was in office instead and had torn up the nuclear deal and was basically making things worse. But I like to think that Darius maybe lives in a universe where the nuclear deal was still in place and where peace was moving toward possible.
Right.
But in a way, I'm really glad. I'm glad that it came out in the time that it did. Not that I wouldn't change the outcome of the 2016 election like in a heartbeat if I could.
Yeah.
But I like to think that as a lot of people were confronted with kind of a xenophobic presidency, that young people were getting to read a book about, a biracial kid that goes and visits a different country, and maybe they get to like decolonize their thinking a little bit. So that's really, I don't know, that's really weird and hard to think about sometimes of like,
I understand.
What would the book's reception have been if it had come out in like Hillary Clinton presidency? I don't know. On the other hand, the world would probably be on less fire than it is now.
In the book, and I can be wrong here, was the fact that I felt that the relationship between Darius and Sora was very touchy. They were very comfortable with their bodies and, like hugging or just, being there for one another, which is great. We need to move away from toxic masculinity. But correct me if I'm wrong, like I feel that the US and, the US upbringing, and specifically with cis straight boys, I think every time, even if you get a little too close, they have the no homo code or, something of that sort. So could you speak a little on that? Like, is there a difference between the Iranian culture, like how Iranian boys, cis boys, or for that matter, boys who also identify as, straight or otherwise, and the difference between the Western culture?
Yeah, for sure. There are definitely kind of different cultural rules about expressions of platonic affection. It's not uncommon to see men holding hands as friends or women holding hands as friends in Iran. That's just, there are different boundaries around physical touch. Whereas, yes, in the United States, yes, two boys even like stand too close to each other and they have to no homo.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in exploring that through the eyes of someone who'd grown up in the United States and then goes and makes a friend that's just like, yeah, it's totally okay for us to touch like platonically. That's a normal thing that human beings get to do and that friends get to do with each other.
Right.
And so I was very much aware of that kind of cultural disconnect. And I was very intent on making sure that it was a friendship and not a romance. I think for a couple of reasons. One, just when I was that age, my most important relationships were my friends. I was actually lucky in a way that Darius wasn't. I had a lot of really good friends when I was in high school. We had like a whole gang of friends that we hung out with. Right. But like that was what my world revolved around. Right. And so I really wanted to honor friendships. I also was just not interested in writing like a forbidden gay romance set in Iran. I felt like that was a very Orientalist way of looking at a story like that. Right. And like, yes, Darius is queer, but queer people get to have friendships too. And queer people need friendships. Yeah. And so I was really keen to explore that.
Of course. Nice. So, I think you've already mentioned this in the beginning that the second book wasn't planned, you kind of knew what would happen and you waited for the right idea to come in and then you kind of, just wrote the second book. And having read the second book on audio, I loved it, really enjoyed it. And I see that, the story was kind of, has a completion to it. Like, if you want, you can still go ahead. Otherwise, it's a whole thing. But still, I am a reader. I speak for millions of people behind me. Is there a plan for you to go back to Darius or the Darius in the family and explore something in the future?
There's no plan right now. I think it would be really fun to write a third one. Right. I really like trilogies. I think, growing up, I was a theater major in college. Right. We studied the Greeks. The Greeks loved a trilogy. Star Wars loves a trilogy. Lord of the Rings loves a trilogy. I think it'd be really fun to do a third one. I think first of all, I would have to make sure that I knew a good story that was worth telling, because I think the worst thing would be for me to write a third book and it be kind of bad. Yeah. I mean, like, look at what happened to Game of Thrones. That was the only thing everyone talked about for like 7 years. And then they made a terrible final season and no one talks about it anymore. It was just forgotten.
Yeah.
And so I definitely don't want to like sabotage myself in that way. But also just kind of from a practical standpoint, just like the business side of writing trilogies.
Yeah.
Every book sells less than the one before.
Yeah.
And so like it would have to make sense to even write a third one, because generally about 10% of the people that read a first book will read the second, and 10% of the people who read the second will read a third. And so, for it to make sense, for a publisher to want to publish it, the first two books would have to do really well, or like a movie get made, which fingers crossed, maybe it will get made. Who knows? Or like it goes viral on TikTok for some reason, and then people start buying, 1,000 copies a month. Which also, if anyone wants to, make it go viral on TikTok, please, I won't mind at all. Go ahead, just do that.
I think
just let me know
TikTok
how
is
it
such a
goes.
great place. Like, look at what happened with They Both Die at the end. It just blew up. Not that it's not a good book. It just blew up.
Right. And, it happened organically from word of mouth and just people really connecting with it. And if something like that happened to Darius, then we probably would get a third one, because then, the numbers would justify it. And it's really weird. It's really weird sometimes talking about like the business side of things.
Right.
But like, it is like, it's a mixture of art and business. And like, I still have to pay my rent. And so sometimes I have to write the books that will sell enough for me to pay rent. As much as my heart might want to do something else. And the good thing about writing, at least, and being an author, is that our skills only get better over time. And especially writing books, for young readers, young readers keep growing up and new young readers keep being born. And so in a way, I'm really lucky in that front, that if I'm lucky and I get to come back to Darius at some point, like there will always be, I think, an audience for it, unless suddenly like everyone in the world stops having babies, which would be really, really weird.
Kind of mentioned advanced review copy, so I have to talk about Kiss and Tell. Like, I cannot leave you without talking about Kiss and Tell. So the cover came out. It looks beautiful, gorgeous, and everything. So tell us something about it. Like, give us a piece of it.
Yes. So it's funny. Probably in the next day or two, I should get my own like advanced copies of it. They're apparently they're in the mail somewhere. It would be like really convenient if someone knocked on my door and they were there right now and I could run and bring them back and show them. But I don't know when they'll get here. But yeah, so it comes out in March. Assuming like everything gets printed on time. Apparently that's like still kind of happening with some books right now. So but it's about a boy named Hunter Drake. He is a member of a hit Canadian boy band called Kiss and Tell. He's gay and he's out, and he's the only gay member of the band. And the story finds him right after he went through a really messy breakup with his boyfriend, who was also the twin brother of one of his bandmates. And so they had been in the public eye basically their entire relationship. And it was really messy and complicated. And so he and the band are on their first like major like arena tour of North America. And as they're going about this, and as Hunter kind of meets and starts taking an interest in one of the members of their opening band, which is basically like the Iranian Jonas Brothers.
Oh, wow.
Yes. It's three Iranian American brothers in a band. And I was like, yes. So Hunter really likes one of them. But as they're like starting to flirt and stuff, his ex-boyfriend releases a bunch of their like intimate text messages over Twitter to kind of embarrass and humiliate him. And so Hunter has to like navigate the public's like perception and consumption of his queer identity, and like the pressures of being out in the public eye, and like how to have a healthy relationship, and also like how to be in a band when the public kind of needs you to produce art, but your life is like a mess. And it's full of little interstitials, like fake BuzzFeed articles and quizzes,
Wow.
interviews, pages of Hunter's like songwriting notebook. And it's really fun. And it was really hard to write. Not only like writing it during the pandemic, but I feel like I was trying to write 3 books in one.
Yeah.
You know, a book about falling in love, and then a book about like consumption of queer people through media. And then a book about, you know, Hunter is white. And my experience has been that sometimes white gay men forget that they are not, in fact, the most oppressed people on the planet, and just can be really kind of self-centering at times. And so it was really hard to like hold all those ideas and blend them into one book. But I think I mostly did it, you know, thanks to my very smart and amazing editor. And so I'm really, really proud of it. And I really hope people like it. And if they don't like it, I hope they won't tag me. Because I just getting tagged in a negative review. Like, I don't mind negative reviews, just don't tag me, because it always ruins my day. And it's not like I can change the book at that point. I'm probably going to get dragged for saying this now, because every so often people are like, if you don't want negative reviews, don't write books. And I was like, I don't want to have, if I had my will, I'd just get no reviews and I would stick my head in the sand. And then I would just have like three people that I would just call them on the phone and be like, tell me I'm pretty. Tell me my books are pretty. And that's all I need in life, is like 3 people to tell me I'm pretty once a month.
Right.
Yeah, I guess. Okay. Well, I'm probably going to get canceled for this, but whatever. It's fine. It's the internet.
No. It's absolutely all right. And don't worry about cancel culture. Everybody gets canceled, I feel.
I know, right? I was like, I just hope it's for, you know, I hope at the end of the day, if I do get canceled, it's,
I don't know, but like
something that doesn't harm anyone.
If
I say something foolish, that's fine, as long as I'm not like actively harming someone.
I just don't know. Now that you mention it, I was kind of scrolling through Twitter, and it came across to me that somebody mentioned that by the rate we are going, someday people will cancel shampoo because bald people will start taking offense. So
I promise to never take offense at people using shampoo or people having head hair. I'm jealous of them, because that means their head stays warm in the winter.
Yeah.
Hold it against them for my own genetics.
Right. But I read it and I was like, shit, that's kind of true. I mean, who knows? There can be sensitive people who are really sensitive about their hair. I mean, you know, them being bald. So absolutely possible. So
all right. I think it's such it's an interesting kind of landscape where we do, you know, we have to balance reasonable expectations of inclusivity and harm reduction with the fact that every single human being is different and has different pain points. And it's simply impossible to be aware of all of them all the time.
Yeah.
And so I think, I think giving people grace is really important, especially over the internet, where like, you can't tell someone's tone of voice or body language, and the internet kind of runs off of rage at times.
Right.
And the algorithms make it so, because that's what sells ads, and social media is kind of constantly evolving the older I get.
Absolutely. That's very, very true.
Social media does a lot of good too.
Yeah.
I mean, social media also gave us, in the book world, it gave us We Need Diverse Books. And it can be a powerful force for positive change as well. So
of course,
I think we just have to, in a way, we just have to accept that, with all goods, sometimes come bads. I mean, it's got really philosophical.
Yeah. And I love how you summed it up, because it's true. I mean, social media is a part of our lives, and just like life, it has 2 sides, the negative as well as the positive. So, I mean, what's life if there is no gray? So, on that note, I would kind of, thank you for joining me and spending this incredible 40 minutes talking and chatting about both your books. So lovely for joining me, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I was really excited to get your invitation, and my pleasure, and I just really appreciate it. So thank you.